The PlayStation 4 is an incredible library of outstanding games. Games like God of War is the latest and greatest AAA title, and it looks and plays absolutely amazing. However, there are more than a fair share of PS4 games that are just awful and will leave you scratching your head as to why this game even exists at all. I'm your host as always, K-Mac Time, but today we're taking a look at another 10 PS4 games that suck. So sit back, relax, hit that like button, and let's jump in with number 10, Energy Hook. Energy Hook is a really odd title, combining things that should be awesome, but they fall short. Now, if you can see here, the gameplay kind of looks like a Spider-Man meets Tony Hawk, which again, sounds rad, but its execution just sadly falls flat on its face. Now, this was a crowd-funded, crowdsourced game, and it only had a one-person development team, so I can't really fault the game all too much again. And it's not a full $60 game, so it's not like it's a huge ripoff. But with that said, the game is just not fun. The graphics look like it's something coming off a GameCube or maybe even an original Xbox or PS2. It's just not up to par with what PS4 games should be, in my opinion. And you can look past the graphical stuff sometimes when the gameplay is at least fun. And in theory, the gameplay should have been fun, but it's just not. It leaves a lot to be desired, especially in the swinging aspects. And there really is no point to this game. It's just kind of to run around and swing from things and trying to get things places faster. I don't know. I didn't care for this one, and it's got a Metacritic score of 22. So it's a pretty low score from critics and users alike, and it's just a really awful game. Next up at number 9 is Yasai Ninja, which is a hack-and-slash game set in feudal Japan where Karo Tomangi and Broccoli Joe face off against other vegetables, and it sounds like a cute enough hack-and-slash adventure, but again, the gameplay lets this game down dramatically. It's just not very engaging. The controls are very sticky, and the combos don't really flow very well. The combat is just not very good. Graphically, it's not the worst game I've ever seen, but it's not the greatest either. It could be really look a lot better and be using polish there, I believe. And like I said, there's no really good story behind it. It's again one of those cheap games you can buy off PSN for pretty cheap, but I would recommend spending your money elsewhere on a game that's of higher quality. Next up is a sports game called Rugby 18, and why, yes, the rugby games on the PS4 tend to be some of the lower rated Metacritic games. This one received a 24 on Metacritic. It's kind of embarrassing to say, it's kind of a step up from the previous games, Rugby 15 being the worst, but Rugby 18 still is a massive letdown, even to fans of rugby, which I've never watched or played myself, so I don't really know what's even going on in this game. All I know is it's not a lot of fun. It looks like a PS2 Madden type game, like graphically. Again, I don't know the rules and stuff of rugby, so I can't really comment on it there, but the Metacritic scores from people who actually do like rugby say that this game is not up to par and that you should look elsewhere if you're looking for a sports game to play. Obviously, Madden or MLB The Show are some very, very popular franchises that just outclass the Rugby 18, and I would recommend steering clear of this game. Next up at number 7 is Troll and I, which is a kind of a weird little platforming adventure game with you playing as a little boy who is followed around by this troll. It kind of plays similar to The Last Guardian, but with even worse controls, if you guys can imagine that. And the thing about that game, at least The Last Guardian had a decent storyline and looked graphically good to go along with the clunky controls. This, on the other hand, is just the worst of all worlds. It's got a terrible storyline. It's glitchy. A lot of things glitch out and you can't do certain goals. You find yourself being stuck in endless loops. Graphically, it's just okay. It's not great, but it's not good either. And the controls of you controlling this is just, it's just really frustrating. It leads to a lot of frustration as a player, and it has been patched a few times. I have not seen much gameplay on it because I've not picked it back up since they've patched it, but from what I hear, the patches didn't really fix everything, and the game is still somewhat broken. Apparently, the game is much worse on Switch, but it's not very good on PS4 either. Another game to definitely avoid. A game that definitely should have never existed, but for some stupid reason it does, and it's on this list because it's just so terrible, is Duck Dynasty. Now, if I was not a fan of the show, if you're a fan of the show, that's great. It doesn't really matter. I'm not here to debate whether the show is good or not, but the game is definitely not good. The game is so boring. I mean, just dragging your feet the whole time, watching grass grow, watching paint dry would be much better than playing this game. Having to listen to these old morons talk about geese and hunting is already bad enough to watch on TV, but to do it in a video game, but it's all slow paced. It's not even like a hunting game. It's just like I don't even know what to call it. Some kind of arcade kind of shooter mixed with like stupid humor, mixed with like hunting tips and like rhythm games. You can play like your goose call. Oh my god, it is just so awful. It's even an awful premise for a video game, but the execution is somehow even worse. I mean, the gameplay is, like I said, stagnant, boring, lackluster at best. Graphically, it's just can't hold up to modern games. I don't know why this was even thought of and or released. If you bought this game, do yourself a favor and put it in the microwave and just destroy it. Next up is a VR game called Catlateral Damage, and while it's a pretty clever title, the game is it's just odd, I'll say that. I mean, it is what it is. It's not trying to be a AAA title, obviously. This is another crowd-funded game, and I think it's just trying to be cute and trying to be kind of funny, but at the same time, it's not really worth your time. It's not really worth your money or your effort. What you do in this game is you're in VR, and you are put in the place of a cat, and you roam around a house, you knock things over, you play with your cat toys, you take big long cat naps, and that is the entirety of the game. Now, for cat lovers, that might sound kind of fun, but again, it's just not worth the money. Even though it's not a very expensive game, this is one you would much rather be suited just watching a gameplay of it on YouTube or something, rather than wasting your hard-earned money on doing it. I mean, obviously, it is what it is, but a game that I would definitely not recommend for even the biggest of cat lovers. Coming in number 4 on our list is an early PS4 title called Basement Crawl, which received a Metacritic score of 26. Now, this game is very, very reminiscent of another game you may be familiar with called Bomberman, a very popular old Nintendo series. It's been around for decades, but this is just a really odd version of, like a rip-off version of that, and it just plays and looks kind of awful. I mean, if you're looking for a game, like a puzzler like this, to play with friends, obviously Bomberman is the way to go. I'm sure there's at least some form of Bomberman on the PS4. If not, you could always play Bomberman R on the Switch, or the countless other versions of Bomberman that have been released over the years on a multitude of systems. Yeah, this game is just so odd and just very strange and just really odd. I didn't care for it. I didn't care for its mechanics. I didn't care for its rip off of Bomberman with its own twist. It just didn't very well. The gameplay, again, is not very good. Graphically, it doesn't hold up. It was an early release on the system, so I kind of give it some leeway there. It's a very cheap game, but a game you shouldn't be looking at or wasting money on at this point in time in the PS4's life cycle. Up next is Air Conflicts Vietnam The Ultimate Edition, which is a remake of a PS3 game with a few added in extras, but it doesn't do a whole lot to enhance the game. Again, the gameplay of this one received a 24 from Metacritic, which is a very low score, and very well deserved because the game graphically looks akin to like a PS2 game. It's not very good. The abilities to do online modes are lacking, and the campaign is just also pretty lackluster here. If you're looking for a air combat sim, I recommend you hold out for Ace Combat 7, which is coming out later this year on the PS4 and looks absolutely beautiful in comparison to this PS2 looking like garbage here. This game is one to avoid at all costs. Even though it is pretty cheap these days, it's just one that you shouldn't waste your money on. Coming in at number 2 is a game called Skylight Free Range 2 Gotchduin, and this game is just all sorts of odd. It's an open world RPG that takes place in Canadian Maritimes in the year 2048, and it just doesn't really look like an actual game. I mean, the gameplay is just mind-numbingly bad as well, but the game looks about as bad as a game could possibly look, especially on a PS4 hardware. You just come to expect a lot more from a game you're spending actual money on in today's day and age, but For some reason, this game actually slipped through the cracks and is available on the PSN. I mean, the review scores of it are absolutely awful. I believe it got a 15 on the Metacritic score, which is one of the lowest games of all time rated-wise. And it's a game that you should definitely avoid at all costs like the plague. Do not waste your time even looking at this game. Just steer clear. Now, before we get to our number one spot on today's list, I just want to do a special mention of No Man's Sky. Obviously, this game, it was a piece of trash when it was first released. It was lived up to the hype of 0%. Everyone hated this game, and it just was a big, major letdown in the gaming community. But since then, it's coming around. It's been patched a handful of times. It's actually a somewhat decent game. It's not the game that we wanted or were promised, but I thought I'd at least throw it in for special mention on this list. But with that out of the way, our final game on the list today is Cartoon Network Battle Crashers, which is just a really cool concept. It's like a Smash Bros, but with all of your favorite Cartoon Network characters. It had a chance to be something special, especially since it had a really cool two-player mode, kind of a side-scrolling beat-em-up kind of mode as well. But the execution was just not there. The gameplay is slow, boring, and just doesn't really have any kind of fun factor. There's no replayability as well. The boss battles are just leave you wanting more. The games doesn't really have a good play style. It just doesn't flow. The combat isn't what you were expecting, and it just falls short. And again, this was a full $60 title when it first came out. I'm sure it's been reduced to about $20 by now. But back then when the game came out and I bought it, I was very much looking forward to playing as some of my favorite characters, having a good time with this, and I was just let down. And that's why it makes our number one spot on today's list. Now you may be wondering, well, what about some other games we've heard about, you know, like Life of Black Tiger or something like that? Well, there's actually another list I've made of awful PS4 games. Check that out. Link will be in the description for that and in the end slate. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. And if you guys have any other suggestions for awful PS4 games, by all means, let me know what they are down in the comments down below. Like I said earlier, make sure you guys are smashing that like button and subscribing for more videos. But until next time, guys, remember that it is always K-Mac time somewhere. Until then, take it easy and peace out.